Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. It's on time. This is Tasha Brown. She's currently with Alive Tech in Florida, and she's going to talk to you today about what an instructional designer can do for you. And this is a great complement to the session I did on yesterday, which was about the online course model. So, Tasha, I talked to people yesterday about the overarching what will happen in the 5-step process with the initial meeting, the trainings, the development of the content, that type thing. So unless it was a specific question, I really didn't go into details about what you're going to talk about as far as the relationship with the ID and the faculty members. So I kind of saved that for you because I knew you were coming.
Okay.
So when you're ready, just go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Veronica, and I would like to say welcome to all our participants that is joining me today. One of the things we're going to talk about, as Veronica has alluded to, is what can an instructional designer do for you? And you would see the abbreviated title, or ID, and that is what I would maybe refer to it as some throughout the presentation. But to give you a little background about me, as Veronica said, I do work with a company called Alive Tech, where I'm the director of the higher ed team / a senior instructional designer. My team in particular is responsible for working with higher ed institutions across the United States and helping them get their courses online. We provide that service as a standalone service as well as a support to other colleges that may have an instructional design team, but they need that support to help get some more courses done. So that's pretty much what I do here at Alive Tech. So we're going to begin the presentation by looking at facts. And because I am a doctoral student in dissertation phase, I like to know what stats says, what does this information mean to me as I go forward. So the first thing we're going to look at, in 2013, Allen and Seaman conducted a study, and they do this study every year for the last 10 or 11 years, and a new one will be coming out in January. But the
Just lost your audio, Tasha.
they found out about last year was 7.1 million students took an online course. Now, looking at that number, amount counts for 33%. So a third of all our students that are taking classes are taking them online. If that doesn't wow you, I don't know what, because that number is significant. If we have a third of our students taking courses online, the other 66% are going to our campuses. So how do these students have what they need when it comes to the online course? You will also see in the next fact, in the next stat, that 66% of our chief administrators believe that online learning is going to be the next phase. It's critical to their institutions, to our institution. It's critical to our success. And then you will see a whopping 90% believe that this number will continue to grow. So you have all these students taking these courses. You have your chief administrators believing that this is going to be the future of our universities. So we have to think about how can we make sure our courses or our online courses are standing apart. We also have to realize and accept the fact that at some point this number of online courses is going to plateau. So what does that mean? How does that affect us as we design our courses? Those are things we have to think about. So as we think about the number of courses that are being offered by numerous of universities, you would think that how many universities offer so many different courses. So this leads to our next slide and our next question. How do you ensure that your students are taking your course? How do you make your course stand apart? What can you do differently that makes students go back and say, "Ooh, Dr. So-and-so had a great course. You should take that course." Not that it was easy, but it was challenging, it was engaging, it was innovative. So how do you ensure that you keep those students coming to your courses when we know at some point it's going to level out? How do you develop a quality course? We know faculty members bring a lot to the table. They're our content expert, our subject matter experts. They have the knowledge. But how can we get that knowledge in an online environment, in a learning management system that is effective, but also meeting the needs of our students? And then how do you decide which tools or which teaching techniques or which methods or how to arrange your discussions or your activities in your course. These are all things you have to consider before you even try to even think about designing an online course. So to help you ensure your courses are quality, to help ensure that students are enrolling in your courses, and not only just enrolling, but being successful and having a high pass rate and having student evaluations that you can pride yourself on, that you can say, look, we're making a difference. How do you do that? Well, the simple answer is having an instructional designer. An instructional designer is that person that can help you.
You're okay now.
My camera is frozen. Can you all see me? Okay, good. Well, so as we continue, we want to see what is an instructional designer. This is the person, as you see the definition here, is applied theory, research, and design models and developing content and instruction. But this person is very instrumental in getting the content in the online format that is suitable and that is follow best practices, that follow research to ensure you have a great course. So as you can see, some of the things that an instructional designer would do is consult with the faculty members on just how do I get my course developed? Where do I start? How does this process work? What do I do? What do you do? Who do I talk to? Those are just the basic things you have to cover. Another thing the instructional designer does is talk about technology. There are so many technology tools and so many Web 2.0 tools and so many different options to choose from, to sometimes it can be overwhelming in deciding what tool is the best tool. But by working with an instructional designer, he or she can tell you that, okay, if you're trying to do this, it may be best if you use a wiki, or if you're trying to do this, you may need to use a blog, or have you thought about doing an infographic to present this type of information? There are a variety of things you can think about. So the instructional designer would be there to help you. But what you would bring to the table is, this is my idea, or this is what I was thinking. Can we just brainstorm? So that instructional designer will help you fluff out, that's my keyword, fluff out your ideas. The instructional designer will also tell you how to deliver the course. We're not only concerned about just development, but delivery is just as important. Because if the development of the course goes superb, but your delivery is not good, that means we have failed somewhere. So we're also focusing on the course delivery. We ask you to keep notes about what went well or what didn't go so well or what were a lot of questions, so we can go back and address those at some point. Another thing the designer does is provide training and support. Now the training aspect is, an instructional designer may say, you may have a question on how do I use Blackboard? Or how do I use that wiki we talked about for that particular activity? So an instructor stages. This is what you can do. This is how you do it. Or let me mute myself for 1 second. Ambulance. Sorry about my ambulance in the background. But the instructional designer also provides the support. Say, for instance, you're trying to work on your course content, you're trying to get it out. The instructional designer can provide you with support throughout that process on how do you do something. Say, for instance, you're trying to work on your first piece of content and you're working in a modular format where you have your overview. This is what the course is, this module is about. Then you have your objectives where you have, this is what you're going to learn, and then you have all your activities. So maybe you need help writing measurable objectives, or maybe you need help fine-tuning your activities or making them more applicable to online learning. That's where the instructional designer can provide that support to you. So as we have identified what's the role and where does the designer come in at, the next thing we think about and discuss is, where do you begin? It's kind of frustrating. Do I begin with a syllabus? Do I begin with my assignments? Do I begin with my lectures? Where do I begin? And my philosophy is, there is no need to reinvent the wheel. By that I mean, if you already have, maybe let's say teach this course face-to-face, what can you pull from that face-to-face course? More than likely you already have a syllabus for that course. If you teach multiple courses, you have all of your syllabi. So take your syllabi and look at them and say, this is what I want to do in my online course. Now, you won't be able to use that syllabus for that one course in your online, but you definitely can tweak it. So do not start from the bare ground if you don't have to, but take what you already have and let's identify how we can use that. You will look at your syllabus and it more than likely will have some course goals on there. So look at your course goals and just reevaluate them. Make sure, first of all, that they align with what your course is about, but more importantly, they align with what your program is about. Then as you look at your course goal, you're going to draft your syllabus, of course, or modify the one you have, and then look at possible activities. And by activities, I mean, look at what you're currently teaching in your face-to-face, or what do you want to teach in your online course. So you may think about the different types of activities you want. Do you want an activity on how to write SMART goals, for if you're teaching a class on writing SMART goals, or the cooking process if you're teaching a nutrition or cooking class? So you'll look at all the different activities you possibly want to do. It's not necessarily to mean you're going to do them, but think about it. The most important thing here is you want to review the textbook and any supplemental resources you have that come with the textbook. If you have a textbook, more than likely they have all types of supplemental resources. They may have online glossary, they may have online games, or different learning enrichment tools to supplement your class. So look at those resources and say, what can I use? Again, there's no need to reinvent the wheel if they already have these type of tools available. Next thing, as I stated earlier, you want to consider the activities that you have covered in your face-to-face course. Again, you won't be able to directly translate that into the online course, but you can pull. For instance, I had a faculty member come to me one time, and she said, Tasha, in my face-to-face class, because she was doing a lecture on distractions and however related to her overall course. So she said, for this particular day, I just come in as a PowerPoint playing behind me with all just different distracting images, tractors, cars, gardening, all these images, and I'm just lecturing. Toward the end of the lecture, we have a discussion, and I asked my students about that PowerPoint behind me. How is that helping you learn or affecting you learn? And so she said, how can I do this in the online course? So we took that idea and we went and applied it to the green screen. We had tons of pictures going on behind her, and this lecture was playing along. So even though it was not in the same face-to-face setting where she had the students to give her feedback, they were able to go to the discussion board and type, how was that presentation? Was all the graphics behind her that was not even related to her topic, was that affecting your learning? Once she had that lecture, she was able to go to the next step and actually apply it to her overall lesson plan, which was having distraction when you're trying to teach your students. So think of different activities you do in your face-to-face course that you can do in your online course, but you would need to talk with an instructional designer to tweak it sort of. As always, you want to chat with your colleagues. See what they're doing in their online courses. And it may be your colleagues at your same institution, it may be colleagues at other institutions. Just chat with your peers to see what is happening in their online courses, their online programs, and see what ideas you can get from that. And finally, once you kind of have all your ideas starting to go along, you want to meet with your ID to discuss the course goals, your objectives, your ideas, because that's where you're going to fluff them out. These are my initial ideas. Now, how do I get this online ready? So now that you know where you begin, we have to identify what are the things you're responsible for and what are the things the instructional designer is responsible for. You're responsible for outlining the course. As great as your instructional designer may be, he or she may not have the necessary knowledge about your engineering topic or about your nutrition course or about your mathematics course. So we're depending on you to help us with the content. Outline your course content, organize it in a way that it seems logical. Now, of course, we will come back and help you organize that and maybe in a better way that goes along. But you definitely want to have your initial ideas of outlining your content. You can also use your textbook as you organizing the content. By that I mean, if you have a textbook and you're using it, how is it outlined? Does it go in a logical order for you in that manner, or do you choose to go in another way? So make sure you just organize the content in a logical manner that the student would easily understand that, and it will flow and make sense to them. While you're organizing your content, you're going to start identifying your topics that you're going to be covering. So for instance, if you know you're going to be, let's go back to our cooking example. You may not want to cover bacon first if you got a novice cook. So you may want to just go over the basic kitchen tools. So identify the topics you would be discussing, and that will help you to organize your content. Then you will start supplying the content to your instructional designer. Now this method and this process can be different based on the instructional designer or based on the content expert, the faculty members. I've seen some faculty members, they start with a course schedule. The course schedule is the due dates. Students like to know when their activities are due. They don't want to search for it. They want to have it in a logical place. So my recommendation is to have just a single document that has all the activities, assignments that are in exams, discussions, whatever activity that is due. Have that document and have a due date associated with that item. So some professors start with that. Some professors prefer to start with their exams or their quizzes, and some professors prefer just start with module 1. Some of them prefer to start with the syllabus. So whichever one you feel comfortable with, you start. My recommendation, at least start with module 1 so that you will have an idea of what you want to, how you want to teach your course and what you want to teach. Now you may evolve from module 1 to maybe another module, but at least get a foundation of that. And what I recommend is once you get module 1 outlined, which module 1 is usually going to be your overview, which I tell professors, your overview is usually what you come to class in the morning or in the afternoon, whenever your class will be in your face-to-face, and you say, today we're going to talk about this. And you give them a brief overview, and then you go into your class session. So your overview will be of the same sort. Then you will have your objectives. That's where we write things to make sure we are measuring our students. We want to make sure our objectives are measurable. And then we have all the activities. And these are your assignments, your discussions, your wikis, anything of that nature. And you will also have your lectures in your rubric. Now your lectures will be things you will record. You can record those in several different tools, which your instructional designer will be able to recommend the best tool. Depending on what your college or university have to offer, you may be able to go to their campus and record. You may be able to use a computer that has Camtasia or Captivate on it, or you may be able to use a Screencast-O-Matic. It's whichever tool your instructional designer feels is best. If you're not the most tech-savvy person, you may stay away from Camtasia or Captivate or Screencast-O-Matic. You may go to a site where someone is there to record for you, and all you do is show up, tell your lecture, and you leave. So it all depends on what your skill set is, and that's what your instructional designer will be able to determine and help you think through. Your rubric are used to help guide students and to help you as an instructor to stay fair and on track with grading. You see rubrics a lot of time with assignments, sometimes with group projects, papers, things of that nature. So you can use rubrics as a way to guide your teaching, and as a way to keep all grading fair. Say for instance, if you're on paper 1 grading, by the time you get to paper 7 or 8, you may get tired along the way, but having a rubric will keep that same across the board. And again, your instructional designer can help you identify what you want in that rubric if you need that assistance. And of course, with your quizzes and exam, they will help you identify how the layout should be. One thing to think about here, when you're teaching an online course, do I need to have a lot of open-ended questions? That is up to you. What I recommend to faculty is beware that you will have to grade those open-ended questions. Now, while your learning management system could probably automatically grade your multiple choice, true, false, matching type questions, I do recommend that you have open-ended question or short answer essay question, because that allows the student to really express that he or she has learned the material, but be aware that you will have to manually grade those questions. Now let's talk about what the IDE is responsible for. One thing your IDE will help you do is write measurable learning objectives. This is very important when you're trying to teach an online course and a face-to-face, but mostly, especially in the online course. We want those objectives measurable. And by measurable, I mean using measurable verbs. So instead of saying the student will understand, because how can I effectively measure if you understand something? But if I would say the student will describe, the student would explain, the student would state, those are things I can measure. I can measure explanation or describing in your discussion post, or maybe in your blog post, or maybe in your exams. I can measure if you understand that. So make sure your objectives are measurable. You will also want to identify how those objectives are being achieved and measured. So in the same instant, if I'm going to say the student will describe, I'm expecting the student to describe that maybe in an exam, maybe in an exam where they have an open-ended question, or maybe in the discussion area, somewhere that I know that objective will be achieved. And the instructional designer may ask you, well, how is this being measured? So be prepared to include that information. And be aware some things can be measured in readings. So that if you're going to assign chapter readings or articles or other supplemental resources, you can say that the student, it may be measured in those effects as well. The instructional designer will also be responsible for providing tips, suggestions, and best practices that can enhance your entire course and encourage collaboration. One of the things we know that is very important in online courses and in courses in general is ensuring that we have collaborative learning between students. So how do we ensure that the students are being engaged and interacting with each other, their instructor, as well as the content? These are the things that an instructional designer look at. So if I'm looking at how to engage students with each other, could that be a group assignment? If I'm looking to see how they can engage with each other, maybe in the discussion area, or maybe on the wiki tool, the blog, or maybe they're going to develop an infographic together, or maybe they're going to do a group presentation or paper. So that's how we look at it, we can make sure that students are engaging with each other. But we also can look at how we're making sure the students are collaborating with their with their faculty member as well. You can send messages to them. You can, send them. Some professors I have seen, they send verbal message where they do a quick recording just to check in. Say, for instance, you had a paper that was due and you noticed some common mistakes between all the students' paper. So they may do a quick 5-minute video and post it to the online course, so that way they can interact with their students. And then, of course, we want the students to engage with the content. So this includes the idea saying, let's think about this. If you got this particular activity, it may be better as a game, or maybe better as a learning object, which is a form of learning and interacting with the content. So the instructional designer would do that. This instructional designer will also follow best practices when it comes to designing your course. So you may want to include a lot of pictures and a lot of different colored text on your page, but the instructional designer may say, no, let's stick from that and let's try this. So because you have to think about your different type of learners. So those are different type of best practices that he or she will follow. You may want to include a lecture in your course, and as a professor, you may say, I want my lecture to be probably about 45 minutes. But as an instructional designer, he or she may say, well, okay, that's a good idea, but should you have your lecture maybe chunked into 15 minutes? Because that makes the students easier to understand the information and keep their attention down. Their attention span is shorter as is. So making sure the information is chunked, but at the same time appropriate. So instead of having a 45-minute lecture, you may have 3 15-minute lectures, which covers the same amount of content, but it just chunked the information and convey in a way that is easy for the student to understand it, easier for the student to code it for their long-term memory, and give the student just a chance to process it. So those are some of the best practices that this instructor or the instructional designer can provide. Suggest technology tools that can improve learning. Again, to go back to what I discussed earlier, identifying and just the appropriate tool. And sometimes your instructional designer may not know. He or she may have to do research, and that is okay. That's the reason we have in our field people that we can go to or just look at different forums or different groups we're part of to say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Have you had something similar? But the internet has a variety of tools, so there's going to be always something usually to help you achieve your goal. Now, it may not be to the same level as in your face-to-face. It can very well exceed that level, but he or she will be able to provide you the appropriate technology tool that can help you improve your learning and engage the student. The instructional designer will also review the content for clarity and consistency. Now, this is one of the most important things when it comes to online learning. One of the common problems I see is clarity and consistency is that it may be, the instruction may make sense to you. That's because you're so close to the material. You know what you're trying to say. But when another person read it, maybe your instructional designer read it, it may be missing some pieces. So he or she may ask you some question. What do you mean? Or what are you looking for? What are you trying to get your students to understand and learn from this moment? So he or she will ask you questions just so he or she can so they can clarify that information as they're writing your instruction or as you put this information into your learning management system. It's also looking for, your instructional designer is also looking for consistency. For instance, let's go back to the course schedule example. Some professors like to put their course schedule in the syllabus. Now, if you put your course schedule in the syllabus and you have a separate document or a second course schedule somewhere else, if you update one of those documents, you're going to have to make sure you update both of those. And as the course is being taught, sometimes you may not be aware or may not recall, oh, I have a course schedule, as well as I have those dates in the syllabus. So a best practice recommendation would be to keep it only in one place. So that way it'd be consistent throughout the course. So that way, say for instance, you're teaching the course in the spring and you're going to turn around and teach the course in the fall, and you went in and updated your dates in the course schedule, but you forgot to update it in the syllabus. Now you have students seeing 2 dates and they don't know which one is the correct one. So we're reviewing for clarity and consistency. Another thing your instructional designer would do is help to make sure your course is accessible and does not violate copyright. This is very important as we advance in the technology age. You want to make sure that everything is accessible to all students, and not making it accessible once you have a student enrolled in your course, but having that course already accessible. By accessible, I mean having your lectures already transcribed, or having the notes that they need already, or making sure your videos are clear. Those are things to make sure your course is accessible. Make sure it's easy to navigate, because you do not want your students not having the necessary tools or being prepared. We have to make sure we're abiding by that law now. We also have to make sure it does not violate copyright. No longer can we just find an image on Google and say, hey, this image is very appropriate to my lecture, I'm just going to put it in my presentation. We can't do that anymore. We have to read what the copyright policy is on those images. And that's not just to images. It also applies to your textbook material. If you're adopting the textbook for your course, more than likely you can use that. But if it's in the textbook that you're not adopting, you cannot use those resources that they have. By resources, I mean the online resources, or just saying, hey, it's a great graph in this book that really displays this mathematical problem better than the textbook I adopted. But unfortunately, if you haven't adopted that other textbook in your course, you more than likely would not be able to use that graph or that picture you want to copy out and share with your students. So your instructional designer will be able to help you think through that process. Other things to consider, and this alludes to one of the questions that have been posted, is discuss the amount of time it takes to develop a quality online course. It takes time, and time. You have to make time for meetings with your instructional designer. You have to make time for you to brainstorm and think through your process. Then you have to make time to develop the course and review the course. And we'll talk about more review in a little while. But when I talk about review, I'm talking about reviewing the course through a whole perspective, not just from your review, but the instructional designer review and other reviews that come along. But why does it take so much time? Because all these things have to happen. They just don't happen instantaneously. And more than likely, once you even develop the course, you're going to have to go back and look at it and say, oh, I wish I would have did it this way, or that really doesn't make sense. So let me just change that activity out. It takes time. Quality products take time. So be prepared to devote time to developing a course. You also have to devote time to the course because, as the last bullet, other bullets rather indicate to you, have technical problems. You're going to have problems with your computer, or maybe you're going to have problems with getting a video schedule, a lecture schedule, getting other things done. So you have to be cautious and mindful of those things. You also have to be mindful of your other obligations to teaching and researching and servicing. If you're already on dissertation committee chairs or committees, or if you over serving on other committees, hiring committees, you have to think about all those other activities you already have your time devoted to, in addition to teaching and researching. So then you also have to think about just the normal things: vacation time, holidays, conferences, and other obligations. And this is just not from your end. This is also from the end of the instructional designer, from the end of the technical people that may be assisting you, from the end of the holidays that may be coming up. You have to think about all of this in a whole, in a bigger picture. So it will take time. Now, one of the questions that has been asked is how many days or week in advance of the course starting would you suggest? I say at least 1.5 semesters before. So if you're going to teach a course in the fall of next year, I would suggest probably starting no later than mid-April, mid-March, somewhere around spring break time, because you would need time to meet with your designer, flesh out your plans, have time to record. You have to be mindful that developing and teaching an online course is totally different from your face-to-face course. With your face-to-face course, you usually would just maybe show up, prepare the night before, and then you go in class and teach. But your online course, it is meant to be flexible. So if classes start on August the 1st, you need to make sure your entire course is ready, in my opinion, ready to go no later than July 15th. That gives you a 2-week buffer to make sure everything is on point and on target. But that would mean you probably have to have the course ready no later, if you're doing it yourself and working with your designer in tangent, no later than July 1st. Now, depending on the model you have, if the instructional designer is doing all the work, you would need, he or she would need content more sooner. But if you are doing it yourself with your instructional designer providing support, assistance, and guidance, then you want to have a timeline mapped out with your instructional designer. Well, by this due date, I'm going to have module 1 done. By this due date, I'm going to have module 2. By this date, I'm going to have all my assignments written out. So that way you can time yourself and not be at the very last minute trying to get the entire course done. So hopefully that answered your question about how long does it take. And also, as Veronica has alluded to, just getting copyright. Copyright can take a while, especially when you start dealing with big companies and they have their own process where you have to submit paperwork. I've even seen where one company said it would take just 3-4 weeks before they even respond to you. So if you're waiting on getting permission to use copyrighted videos in a course or copyrighted chapters from a textbook, anything it can take time. So if you can start preparing early on, you can buffer in that time. You can have that time as a buffer to help you along the process. So I alluded to it earlier about the review process, and we'll discuss what is the review process. At this point, the course is examined to make sure that it's instructionally sound. Again, we're talking about clarity, consistency. Do your instructions make sense? Are they written out in full? We also talk about the appropriate standards to ensure your students are successful, because we just don't want to get students in our course. We want them to pass with good grades. We want them to be successful, and we want to have good evaluations at the end. Now, one of the questions do talk about, how do you get your students to fill out more evaluations? It depends. Some students are just not going to do it. I don't know what your policy is. Can you offer a bonus point? Can you offer any type of little things to help encourage? But what I suggest doing is having students fill out a mid-evaluation. It can be anonymous. This just gives you an idea of what students are thinking about in your course. Do they like it? Does this make sense? Is this meeting their needs? Those are things you can do to try to at least garner where you're going, and make some improvements before the end of the course. You also want to have your course in the review because it helps you to make sure that it meets accreditation and departmental standards. Now, more than likely, your instructional designer may not know what are those standards, and he or she will depend on you for you to share that information. So if you know your accreditation is looking for certain things, for instance, if you're in a college and they want certain policy or certain standards in a syllabus, after so long, your instructional designer will remember, oh, if you're in the college of ed, here you will have to have these standards in your syllabi. So he or she will make sure you have that included. And your instructional designer may even give you a template to say, this is what your syllabus should look like. And it will have a section for you to include that in. It will also may include departmental standards, where within your department, if you have certain standards or if you have certain policy that you may have to have on your syllabi, this instructional designer can make sure during that review process that that is included. There are two types of reviews that usually take place. And there are course reviews and quality matters reviews. All in all, you want to make sure that you're paying attention to detail and that the course is a good course from beginning to end and that it flows well. So the course review process consists of a review that is done by the professor at the beginning and throughout. The instructional designer will look at it throughout as well. The thing to note here, if you're working with an instructional designer, he or she may be as close to that course as you are. So it's a great opportunity to have a third set of eyes to look at the course. This may be another instructional designer that is a peer. It can be a senior instructional designer, or it can even be a manager. Someone else that give a third opinion of the course to say, hey, I know you and Dr. So-and-so was very close to the course, but this really doesn't make sense. So can you revisit this? Excuse me. Or can you rewrite these instructions, or that video just need to be beefed up a little more? That third person can give you that type of feedback. You can also have the course reviewed by your department, and this is a very good thing. Again, that goes back to the accreditation standards and the departmental standards. If you have that person look at the course, it will ensure that that course is quality based on their guidelines. Now, as you see below, you will see that the course is also reviewed for accuracy, clarity, consistency, quality, grammar, spelling, and punctuation. Those are all things that just happen in the course. Sometimes as an instructional designer, as a professor, you may miss it. But again, it's good to just have another person look at it and say, you put that is incorrect, or you missed that punctuation. Now, as we look at the Quality Matters Review, this is the rubric that is used to evaluate the quality of a course and online courses, of an online course and blended courses. Unfortunately, I cannot show you this rubric because this rubric is protected by not allowing you to see the rubric. But what I can do is give you a link, which I just posted in the chat, where you can go and just look at the standards there as we talk through them. One thing you must know is that your university must subscribe to this rubric. So if your university has not subscribed, that's the reason you cannot have a copy, because it is a protected document. If you on the website, you will see that it talks about the rubric, and the rubric is used to evaluate the quality and is based on the research and online best practices. So this rubric has been revised often, and is revised based on what research is saying, what best practices are saying, what people are implementing. This review is either conducted by an instructional designer or a certified Quality Matters peer reviewer. And the constructs of this Quality Matter rubric are the following. You will see listed on your screen. Most of it is already taken care of if you're working with an instructional designer in some form or fashion. For instance, the course overview and objective. In that construct, it talks about, do you have a course introduction? Are your students alerted to how to navigate through the course? And that is usually taken care of by an instructional designer when he or she recommends, hey, you should record a welcome video, just welcoming your students to the course. Or maybe you should include a brief introduction on how to use the course. Say, for instance, the first level of the course, and students this is their first time taking an online course because your course is the first one in the program, maybe you should have a brief introduction on how to use the learning management system. How do you find your syllabus? Where are the assignments? That type of thing. The learning objectives, as we talked about earlier, your instructional designer will make sure they are measurable, and the quality matter rubric have different standards that we should meet to ensure those standards are met. And you will see the rest of these things on your screen as well. And we'll talk about the course technology and the support and accessibility and the interaction you are having with your students as it relates to the content of your course. So this rubric is very helpful, and it can be a great guide to ensuring that you have a quality course developed for your students. So hopefully that explains the difference between the Quality Matters rubric and a course review. And more than likely, in my instance, this is always taking place toward the end. Now, the course review may take place in stages because you don't want to, for instance, if you're doing the same steps over and over in a module, say for instance, students going to be typing a wiki up, and every module they're responsible for going and making an entry. Well, if they're doing that in module 1 and by module 8 is a mistake, you don't want to repeat that mistake. So it's good to have maybe incremental reviews where you can go in and you sit down with another person and say, hey, let's look at the course. Is it going okay? And when I say you're looking at it, you can look at it with your instructional designer, and then the instructional designer maybe can look at it with the person that may be reviewing the course on his or her end to ensure that you're doing things correctly. But at the end, you will want to do a whole Quality Matters review as well as a course review. And again, I'm stressing the importance of having a clear consistency, just making sure everything flows well. So what makes this process successful? Again, it goes back to one of the things we talked about earlier, submitting content on time and in the correct template. Even if you are doing it yourself and consulting with an instructional designer, it is very important that you have a timeline and stay on track to make sure you have that done in the right amount of time. Making sure you review the content and receive feedback from your ID. When your instructional designer give you feedback, just making sure you apply that feedback in that module and as you go forward. Being open to incorporating new things and new technology is very important. As we progress in this age of digital learning and students being more involved and more hands-on, how do we use the new and latest technology to ensure that students are having a great learning moment? Also, playing with your learning management system early. And by learning management system, I mean your Blackboard, if you're using Blackboard, or you may be using Sakai or Moodle, those systems, whatever your system is desired to learn, Canvas, playing with it before the first day of class. Just get it in there, get a play shell and just see how it works. You can't tear anything up usually, so it's just important that you play in it so that when you're teaching the course, that you're not trying to learn how to teach the course, learn a new management all at once. Communicating with your ID often. It's important that you have an open communication with him or her. They will be your guide. They will be your gatekeeper to helping you move along through that process. And taking risks and thinking outside the box. In order to get students enrolled in your class, you're going to have to do things differently. You cannot just have a 45-minute lecture, read a few chapters out the book, take a test. You have to have things that are innovative, things that are capturing their attention, things that are engaging them and wanting them to take your course. Would that mean you have to do things differently? Yes. That means you would have to maybe record more or learn different activities and tools. Yes, but that's what it matters when you're trying to get students engaged, get them in your course, but also prepare them for their careers, which is very important. As you teach the course, the designer is not just concerned about you developing. He or she is concerned about you teaching the course. One of the things I recommend to teachers is keep a running list of things that work well, things that didn't work so well, things you can improve, and review your student evaluations. Poll your students at midterms to examine what is going well and what's not. These are all things that can help the instructional designer help you. You can also ask your instructional designer for tips on how to teach this course. well, how do you think this should go, or when should this go, or things of that nature. He or she can provide that information to you. Review the course and become familiar with it before class start. Just like I talked about earlier, playing with your learning management system, go in the course. You don't want to be in the course on the very first day trying to teach it and you really don't know how the course is laid out. So take some time, a couple weeks before class start, just get in, play with it, understand it, and ask your instructional designer any questions at that point. While you're teaching the course, you want to make sure you communicate with your students often. It's nothing worse than having an online course and the students never hear from you. So communicate with your students, and that is just, as I talked about earlier, maybe providing a brief video to all the students on just how well this paper went and focus on these areas, or just checking in with them, being there, having open office hours where they can come in and chat with you, ask you questions, or you having an exam review before the exam next week. Have that open communication with your students. And one of the most important things is provide prompt feedback. Student wants your feedback. So have feedback and provide it promptly. So if they submit a paper on today, which is Thursday, you may want to provide feedback within a week. But whatever that is, make sure you outline your policy within your syllabus. So some professors like to put, if you send me an email, I will respond within 24 hours during the weekday and 48 hours on the weekend. And you can have a similar policy with providing feedback on written assignments or in graded assignments or your exam. Put that type of information in your syllabus so students can be aware of when to expect a response from you as it relates to those things. And like I stated before, keep a list of changes and other things that can be improved. Some things need to happen right away, so of course you're in contact with your instructional designer when that happens. Say for instance your test is already in the course, but students say they can't see your test. Well, of course you'll contact your instructional designer and say, what is going on, can you help me? But some other things may not be as pressing, so maybe you should have redid this assignment and you learned students had a lot of questions about one assignment. So you say, well, maybe I can redo this. Maybe I need to have a different case study. So you'll jot that note down and maybe even jot some ideas down, and then once you're ready to revise your course at the end of the semester, make a few changes, you can speak with your instructional designer about how you can better that. So what do students need while taking the course? They need discipline. They need encouragement. They need that constant communication again. They want to know how they're doing, where they're making mistakes. They also need technical support. Now, you may not be able to provide that support, but someone on your campus probably have that support they can provide depending on what level it is. If they need support with the learning management system, hopefully your department or your college will have a go-to person or a go-to department to accommodate that for students. But sometimes they're going to also need support just on questions and answer, I don't understand this, or I may need an extension for this assignment because this happened. That is up to your judgment, but they're going to need that type of support. As I stated earlier, feedback, and that feedback can be enhanced by our rubric. So we go back to our example about getting comments back within a week. You can use a rubric not only for having you be consistent in grading, but also getting those comments back in a timely manner. They need meaningful activity and learning experience. It's nothing worse than having activities that's just busy work. Make it relate to their learning or their careers. For instance, in one course, I was working with a faculty member, and she had a green screen presentation where she had students taking calls at a restaurant, because this is for a restaurant hospitality management course. And it was how not to take a call and handle customer and provide good customer service. So she had these real life videos, but they were meaningful, and students were able to discuss in the discussion board after watching a 2-minute video on what went well and what didn't go so well. What did the hostess do that was not appropriate? So make sure these activities are meaningful. Make sure they are engaging and make a good impact on the student learning experience. You also want a course that is easy to navigate, and that's one that's engaging. You don't want to have a lot of stuff going on. Have one that is easy to navigate, and that is usually helped with the instructional video that you would do at the beginning. So one question I have is, what is your opinion on use course templates? Have they ever worked for you at an institution who used template? If so, was that an efficient process? Course templates are very helpful in my opinion as it relates to designing a course. Again, it goes back to like a modular format. At the top, I will provide my professor with a Word document that had modules, overviews, objectives, and activities. And in the overview, I would tell the professor, write what you would tell your students the very first morning, beginning of class each day. Your objectives, we will go through and make sure they're measurable. And then for your activities, we will usually start off with some type of reading. It can be a reading from a chapter of a textbook. It can be from external readings. It can be any other supplemental sources, anything you want the students to do. Usually that will follow by some other lectures or some videos that were found on YouTube that we just linked to, or some TED Talk videos. Depending on what the subject is, we link to those activities as well. If there were other resources that the professor wanted the students to view, we'll put those there as well. And then finally, we'll have the activities if they came in that order. Because sometimes you may have to have a discussion or an assignment or exam before, because of the logical order it falls in. But the template is very helpful. And I think for a lot, it did help reduce the number of questions, and it helps the faculty member get an understanding of how it flows. So as I conclude this presentation, is some of the things we talked about: collaborate with your instructional designer. That person, this is going to be your go-to person, your right-hand man, because he or she can provide training, the tips, the resources, the best practices that you may not be aware of because you're not necessarily in the field every day. You're your subject matter expert if you're a nursing faculty member, or you're a restaurant management or education or engineering. That's your subject area. So rely on your instructional designer to help you design a quality course. Your instructional designer will also offer suggestion on using the learning management system. So if you're using Blackboard, on what tools you should use in Blackboard or Canvas or Moodle, and he or she will help you select the most appropriate tool that will ensure that your courses are quality, engaging, innovative, and accessible. And most importantly, he or she will make sure you have a smooth delivery, because that is just as important as a smooth development period. So I have enjoyed talking to you all about this topic. I hope that you all found some information helpful. On the screen, you see my contact information, and feel free to contact me. Are there any questions?
Tasha, I appreciate you taking out the time to present for this conference. As I've told other presenters and attendees, that the chat area and the discussions area will be emailed to me, so that at the end of this conference, I can compile all of those resources and the presentations and post on the website. The sessions that are going to be archived will be shared as well, and I'll be sure to get a copy of the recorded file to you for your artifacts. Okay. Go ahead. I was going to read it to you.
Okay. I see a question. I'm sorry. Okay. I see a question from Winona, I believe. How do you get the faculty to interact with and use the ID? One thing I had when in my previous job, faculty, they may not want to come and use an instructional designer. I said, well, I'm here to help you. Your job is to give me the content and help you get this online in the best format. How can I help you reduce your load? You're already having to teach. You're already having to conduct research. You're already having to do other activities. So how can I help you develop a quality course? In some way or another, I pull in student opinion of evaluation that they usually have to have at the end of a course. Do you want to have those type of evaluation where they're reflective of you in a positive manner? Of course, you may have some evaluation that may not necessarily be true if a student didn't get a good grade or earn a good grade, but that's usually not all your students. So I would tie in the importance of having good evaluation, the importance of having faculty members develop courses that are consistent within their department. You don't want your course to be different. Say, for instance, you were talking about several courses from your department. You all want to have them uniform and look the same because you want students to have that same experience. So tell them all of the positive things that you can bring to the table as an instructional designer, and then encourage them. Sometimes that means you may have to do a mock-up just to show them, because some people believe they learn by seeing. So you may have to do a little more work, but once you tell them the things that an instructional designer can do for him or her and how they can make that job easier, not only just for development, but for delivery while they're teaching the course, usually there's some buy-in because faculty members do not want to spend extra time developing content while they're trying to teach it when that can be done ahead of time. So use all those positive things that you know will work and help them and make their job easier as some bait, so to speak, to reel them in and to try using an instructional designer. Any other questions?
Well, looks like we're good on this end, Tasha. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thank you, dear.